Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm happy that one more time I have the opportunity to be with the other brothers, sisters of Ahlul Bayt Islamic Society of New England and Zikr MIT Shia Muslim Association. As Dr. Masaleh said, this is the fourth lecture of the lecture series titled Hikmah in the Qur'an. The title of this lecture is Hikmah in the Signs of Apocalypse, uh, a commentary on the 54th Surah of Quran, Surah al-Qamar. We focus on the verses 1 to 8. And so let's start as usual for this lecture series with the blessing with these verses. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤتى الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثيرا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب. He grants wisdom to whomever he wishes, and he who is given wisdom is certainly given an abundant good, and none takes admonition except those who possesses intellect. We said in the previous lectures that in Quran there are about 20 times the word hikmah is used in 19 verses. This is the order of the verses when you go to the current Musaf Osmani. But if you order them, we discussed them in the first lecture, categorized them for different categories of maybe uh, kind of hikmah given to previous prophets, hikmah revealed to our prophet, and hikmah to non-prophets, and four primary duty of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which is one of them was teaching hikmah. And then if we order these verses chronologically to the order of revelation, the first one, uh, according to different chronological ordering, is the verse which came, the verses came in the Surah al-Qamar, the 54 Surah of Quran, which today we are going to discuss this surah. You know, the idea, as I just add, I'm interested to do, we are interested to do the commentary of Quran or understanding Hikmah in the Quran, but also this is an occasion doing a commentary in these passages. Some call this called pericopes. You know, there is a bundle of passage. In those passages, the word Hikmah has came. So we use the occasion to study those passages, do the commentary. So maybe a little bit, our goal would not be limited to Hikmah, and because for understanding Hikmah in those verses, we need to understand those verses better. Uh, and for example, for today, I think we maybe need a little bit discussion with the concept of miracle or mu'jiza, which I may do it more thoroughly next lecture. So possibly this commentary of these verses, which I will do, the verses 1 to 8, will go 2 lectures. So, so for the getting familiar and blessing, I read these verses. Maybe I just read the, although we need to do the Arabic too. So let me do both. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر وإن يروا آية يؤرز ويقول سحر مستمر فكذبوا واتبعوا أهواءهم وكل أمر مستقر ولقد جاءهم من الأنباء ما فيه مزدجر حكمة بالغة. Here the word حكمة is here. فما تغني النذر فتول عنهم يوم يدعو الداعي إلى شيء نكره خش عن أبصارهم يخرجون من الأجداث كأنهم جراد منتشر مهطعين إلى الداء يقول الكافرون هذا يوم أسر. This is the first 8 verses, because clearly we see the after verse 9 the story change and goes toward the people of Noah. So that's why I put the other verses that we see that. So if it's, let's read the translation. اقترب الساعة says the hour has drawn near and the moon is split, which the name of the surah is also get from the word Qamar, which has come to the in the first verse. Sometimes is called also اقترب الساعة. I think some older, but usually nowadays everybody call it Surah al-Qamar. So the hour has drawn near and the moon is split. If they see a sign, they turn away and say an incessant magic. They denied and followed their own desires, and every matter has a setting appropriate to it. They have already come, there have already come to them reports containing admonishment and representing far-reaching wisdom. So these reports has come to them, these materials come to them, representing far-reaching wisdom, but warnings of no avail. So turn away from them the day when the caller calls to a dire thing. They will emerge from the graves as if they were scattered locusts with a humbled look in their eyes, scrambling toward the summoner. The faithless will say, "This is a hard day." So these are the verses we focus on. We want to, by looking the verses around verse 5, kind of we get better understanding the Hikmah al-Baligha, but there are some issues to really clarify, and that would take maybe a good chunk of time. Uh, so you see here the term of hereafter is there. The two terminology is used sometimes eschatology or eschaton regarding end of times, and then apocalyptic. Eschatology is more neutral, things regarding end of times, but apocalyptics is more somehow reminder of the cataclysmic, drastic events which happen end of times, maybe natural, maybe some wars, maybe diseases and so on, maybe the whole destruction of the physical universe, so the darkening of the sun and the moon. We see in other verses, surahs, especially Surah Al-Takwir is mentioned. I have not distinguished between apocalyptic and eschatological, but we will see maybe our understanding, and especially the first verse, and al-Qamar will be different. But at least whether is necessarily related to end of times, or is or how it is related to end of times, or is as what apparently comes its appearance, uh, is something has happened before, but it's some way maybe related to end of times. But you can see the verses, especially after 6 and 7 and 8, are really eschatological or related to end of times, related to people raising out of the graves again. So out of their graves again. So this have in mind. Let's now I will go some brief discussion of the surah and the contents from I use this from study Quran and say some mention some stuff, and then we go back to maybe directly Al Mizan, and also our main reference, which I said the thesis by Dr. Saqib Hussain titled Wisdom in the Quran. So nearly all commentators consider this verse as Meccan, including Western and non-Western scholars. But there were some people have mentioned some of the verses at the end, maybe added in Medina, which I don't think is true. Allama also doesn't accept. I think it's not very. Some of those guest people do it just because of one point, but ignoring many other points. But it doesn't relevant for now for us for now because it's 3 verses at the end of the surah, which we don't deal much with it. As I said, the name of the surah is getting from the first verse of it about the moon, but is used to be sometimes called اقترب الساعة for the first 2 words of it. Okay, it has some connection with the previous surah and Surah An-Najm, which we would look to this connection. Again, you see that surah is also referring some star or astronomical entity. The name of it is related to that. And it seems is picking up the first verses of this surah, which uh, emphasizing the nearness of the hour and the understanding of the hour. If we go to other verses, and is here means qiyamah, he is means the end of times. This is the wording Quran has used uh, different times regarding referring to the end of times. So in the Surah An-Najm, which is just before this, also in one of the latter verses is this um, idea is reiterated or mentioned or emphasized, which we will see, I think, later on we will see it more explicitly. I didn't put it here. So the whole idea is that imminent end is close. In that surah, also where the discussion about destruction befall the former communities, uh, like Ad and Samud and Noah, and in this surah we have this, and it is more. I mean, so and in one sense the two surahs are connected. In one sense, we can say maybe 54 is a continuation or re-emphasizing more was in 53, but they are not necessarily exactly the same, and that's not also crucial for our understanding of the surah, which is our main focus is. They say this surah was recited by the Prophet in Eid. That's interesting. They say Eid al-Adha, and I think this hadith is Sunni commentary, even Eid al-Fitr and other major gatherings with Surah Al-Qaf, which again we see something from Surah Al-Qaf too. So that's interesting. Okay, but what is the occasion of revelation, or what is this is understood? The first two verses, which اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر and when يروا آية يؤرز ويقول سحر مستمر. So there is a hadith or occasion of revelation and a story which it says these two verses are revealed in that occasion. And this is very commonly understood and nearly in all Islamic commentaries is mentioned, both Shia and Sunni. And then so let's see the story here. And then the same, I will discuss this in from study Quran, but it's the same. You see, even the Allah Tabatawi even discusses it in the Hadith section of these verses is more or less the same. Everywhere is the same. So I read this because we hear what's the story, and then but there will be some questions here. One evening, Prophet Muhammad was addressing. So maybe I forgot the first line. The first two verses of Surah Al-Qamar are understood by the vast majority of commentators as a reference to a miracle performed by the Prophet. So this is usually understood, and as I said, we need some maybe discussion about miracles too. One evening, he was addressing a group of disbelievers and Muslims on the plain of Mina. So they say it has been in Mina, and then some people say it was in 14 of Zul-Hajjah. If that is the case, was the Hajj period, which is possible, is near full moon, I mean, probable. And the Hajj period is a good occasion this happens because there are people coming and going. If there's a Hajj season, they maybe come for this. This is in Mecca period, so it's early period of the prophecy or prophethood of Prophet Muhammad. So it's early years. The hostility is there, but it's not as severe. We have it in latter years of the Mecca period. Uh, Most probably Muslims participate in the Hajj ceremonies with side by side the mushrikeen. So in Mina, they have to waquf, they have to stay for one night. It's possible that people from Mushrik in Mecca and other people were there too. And so, although there are some other details people have said, but this is the most common one. So let's go at this with one main story. So in the plain of Mina, 14 of Zihajjah, full moon, Hajj season, outside Mecca, the Prophet is using the time to they're awake, they're alert to all these ceremonies to invite them. Then dispute happens. The disbelievers have been disputing with the Prophet for several days. Then they some demanding a miracle as a proof for his prophethood, and they began to do so again. Maybe he had some dispute with them before, and he started to set his message, and they start to use the same challenges or arguments against him. Then it says the prophet raised his hand and pointed the moon, whereupon it appeared to separate into two halves, one on either side of nearby Mount Hera. so it is this is how they described it. It says we saw those those who narrate the hadiths, which are many, uh, the moon we saw is splitted, and because Mount Hera is in the horizon, if you're looking back toward Mecca when you are from Mina, you can see that. Then you see moon was uh, one side of Hera, one side of the moon, for example, right side is the right side of Hera, left side is left side of Mount Hera. So the mountain come between. And then the prophet said, bear witness, and the line of separation disappeared. All were left speechless, but his opponents saw discounted it as an illusion produced by sorcery. So this is the one. According to one account, one of the disbelievers says, Muhammad has merely bewitched us, but he cannot bewitch the entire world. Let us wait for travelers to come from faraway places and hear what reports they bring. So this is a miracle moon split because moon is in the horizon and full moon, and many other people farther away can see not the whole earth because half of it is day, but the part which is night, more or less, full moon is all night out. That's one feature of full moon, and then possibly the split should have been seen by other people, and it seems that's what those mushrikeen around Mecca was claiming. Then, when some travelers arrived in Mecca a few days later, they confirmed they too had witnessed the splitting of the moon. This is the hadith says. Okay, we have to come back to this story because there are some questions. But then, if we go to the structure of the surah, after these first eight verses which we read, which after warning the opponents of the prophet of the judgment that will overtake them, because despite seeing this miracle, if we accepting it, it's but seeing the splitting of the moon, they didn't believe in prophet. Uh, then God's warned them about what will happen the hereafter. They will raise out of death, out their graves, become raised out of death, and uh, but it seems many of them, most of them, do not believe. But then you see the verses of the chapter is mostly after this is about the so-called punishment stories. This is the naming the Western scholars give to the stories of the people, the ummas, the previous peoples, which do not accept the message of their prophets. They were they didn't listen to the message that came to them, and then after a while they were punished. Or some of them also mockingly requested where the punishment of God will came, and then the punishment came to them. So among them, people of Noah, Ad, and Thamūd, Lot, Pharaoh, and then so you see kind of the verses, mostly the verses of the surah are following this. It seems this surah is revealed earlier than Surah An-Najm, or by the way, it seems this is the first time this kind of punishment stories is said in more detail without alluding and with few verses and continuously, because this is the names we know when we read the Quran continuously and occasionally, and different places Quran refer to them. And this is maybe for the believers of the first generation of Muslims is the first time they're hearing it, the more comprehensive treatment, which is what usually like that. Quran mentions when people learn and adopt, and other times it can refer to it or add to it, but by referring. So these were examples of previous peoples who were overthrown for similar offenses. Uh, Now, because these are all set to kind of admonition for the contemporary Mushrikeen polities of the Prophet Muhammad, those who were discussing with them, the people of Mecca and the surroundings. So Quran clearly again mentions punishment that await the guilty, 46, 48. And then it goes to a discussion of the nature of God's decree and accounting, that when God says something, promising something, this will happen. But at the end of the surah, we have two verses which give good news uh, or bashara to those who did good and who they believe and steadfast, and what kind of reward they get. So you know that we have heard that the concept of Bashir and Nazir, and usually the function of the prophet to be Bashir and Nazir. The word gospel also comes from Bashir, Bashara. But you see, they're usually together. But if you want to get a precedence to one, we don't have really we have or never we have Quran Bashir come without Nazir, but we have cases Nazir come without Bashir. And Nazir is warning or warner, both meanings, but and then you see this surah is mostly in the Nazir side. Kind of we start from the first verse, verse 1, to this last 54, 55, to just last two. It has more Nazir tone in it. So it's a warning. And then the last two verses, some add Bashara to it. So a balance is done. I mean, there are many discussions that for any system, for a human being, psyche of human beings, uh, Nazir works better. Machiavelli said it. I don't want to go that line, but he he advised the prince is better the people fear you to revere you, but that's very cynical. But typically even psychology experiments have shown we all want to avoid harm, not necessarily gain. So we all mostly avoid from hell. Then I mean, we like to go heaven, but the foremost is avoiding hell. And then even trial with the monkey, stuff like that, we give the option, for example, one certain banana or the option of three bananas. Usually we are cautious, game theory, risking. Most of the human beings are go with the caution to the certain one banana uh, works better to maybe possible, probable three. I mean, so because it's hidayah for people, you need to shake them, you need to move them. It is like that. And as I said before, even for example, in Hinduism, they have either three gods or three manifestation of God. They have temples for them separately, the Brahma for the creator, Vishnu for the preserver. I mean, preserver God or preserver aspect of God, the same God, or Shiva, the destroyer. The commoner usually consider them three separate gods, but okay, maybe elites say no, these are three different aspects of the same God. But they have three different temples, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. The most crowded temples the people take offering is Shiva, so the destroyer. So this is the structure of the surah. So it's mostly to the Nazir side. Um, Now, but there are some objections. I can coming or some questions, some challenges, some different looking, and then we'll see that. Uh, I can disclose them gradually, but I think there is a comment, there's just a footnote underneath of this verse by Muhammad Asad, which is a Quran translation commentary, is the message of the Quran. He was a Jewish convert to Islam early 20th century. Then he become, I think, Pakistani citizen. He got a position, I think, UN ambassadorship for the newly established state of Pakistan. He was very well, I mean, versed in biblical stuff, Quranic one, but he have a little bit more natural or reductionist mind, or kind of avoiding supernatural as possible as it's possible. So the whole issue of miracle, and then you can see in this simple comments, it's just a paragraph, a little bit long paragraph, many issues that open up, which we are going to address and open it. So he says, this is Muhammad Asad, most of the commentators see this verse, the verse 1, which we're discussing, a reference to the phenomenon said to have been witnessed by several of the Prophet's contemporaries, as described in a number of reports, hadiths, going back to some companions. The moon appeared one night as if split into two distinct parts. This is in Farsi is famous Shaq al-Qamar, and Shaq al-Qamar, splitting the moon is known as a miracle. While there is no reason to doubt the subjective veracity of these reports, it is possible that what actually happened was an unusual kind of partial lunar eclipse. So he's the one proposing a non-naturalistic phenomena, not a miracle, and then he suggests partial lunar eclipse. We see there is one other big rival too, and we'll discuss it today. So we end up three options. a lunar eclipse, which produced an equally unusual optical illusion. So it was a lunar eclipse, so it didn't completely change the natural process. Which this man, I personally will see, because even you see Assad at the end doesn't go with this line; it goes another line, and then mm, as a believer, we cannot categorically deny miracles, uh, and always they're not. None of these splitting the moon is impossible. Is not logical impossibility. 1 + 1 = 3 is logical impossibility. So never a miracle can produce that or some other stuff. But this is not. This is probable. Uh, but there are some questions. At some stage, I may mention it. I was going to mention it and maybe repeat it again. That issue first, even those narrators notice a visibility with other people because nobody else has reported it. Uh, because this must have been visible for bigger regions of the earth and is big thing. Uh, so but okay, maybe that although they reported some passengers, some travelers coming to Mecca had seen it, but outside, for example, Peninsula or maybe in the Roman Empire, North Africa, Sassanid one, Byzantine one. The other thing is that if it's really moon split, did it left any physical trace? Because also this is not a simple thing. This has effect on uh, ebb and flow of water and other stuff. But then it's miracle. If you want to do a miracle, you can fix those stuff. To go to that line, extreme line of miracle. The creationists, when they argue that the earth is young, uh, according to Bible, this I'm saying that because we had looked at both sides of it, then we will see. For example, the young creationists in the Christian, especially evangelical circles, Protestants group mostly, they believe in, according to the letter of Bible, the world is young, and then we are told, okay, but the evidence of fossils, other ones, doesn't show that young Earth of 10,000, 20 years, and then so how you claim that? Then they usually counter argument. Look, if God once created three, for example, an old big tree, make as a redwood tree, sequoia tree. Okay, so what created now? Can God create it? Okay, the answer should be yes. And then they would say, if this God created an old big tree, he would create it with his ring, the three rings, which if you cut the tree, you apparently see is 2,000 years old, but the tree was created a few minutes ago. So they would say, they argue that it is a young earth, but it's created to look as old. That's a very extreme. I'm not saying we go this way, but if you want to go the miracle, and if it's really miracle happen and their narration, those issue of gravity or sticking back together or whether doesn't leave the trace, you know, geologically known, lunarly, the geology of lunar. These are questions. So that's I'm saying uh modern mind, and it's possible why do you want to get this line. There are also other groups which I maybe have to discuss next lecture. And it seems Saga Hussein also himself is a little bit inclined to that. And I see that trend among Sunnis, and maybe I'm not sure some Shias too, that they deny there is some more, modern Sunnis, not the traditional ones, that Prophet Muhammad didn't have any miracle except Quran. This I've heard it a lot in recent years, which is not common traditional view, but they all say no, it's just this miracle is Quran, nothing else. It's not like Jesus and Moses or other ones. So then they really want to handle this not as a miracle. So this is one line when people want to go lunar eclipse, and we come back to it, and in what sense it can be lunar eclipse or not, and why are these points are relevant. But he himself picked up another line. Let's read. But whatever the nature of that phenomena is a miracle or lunar eclipse, it is practically certain. I mean, we have to explain if we go lunar eclipse, so in what sense those verses can match to it or not match to it. But let's read it. But whatever the nature of that phenomena, it is practically certain that the above Quran verse does not refer to it, but rather to a future event, namely to what will happen when the last hour approaches. You know, so what is now saying, contrary to the appearance of the verse, which the verbs are past tense apparently, which we come back to it. Both اقتربت وانشق uh, are either past tense or past perfect tense, uh, and it talking about something has happened. So already the hour is closed. We have to discuss this too. But also, enshaka means the moon has split. It's not saying is going to split or will split. So, but what these guys are saying, and what some commentators have picked it up, and we can see it, even Allah discuss it again, is this. They say, because اقترب الساعة remind the mind, brings the mind to attention the hereafter. And it just said it's getting close, but it hasn't happened, but it's getting close. اقترب has become very close. So, and then, but in Shaq al-Qamar will happen when we are already there. It hasn't happened. Because it must be not an event happened in the time of Prophet. It must be a time uh, between اقترب and end of times, and it is something which happened is the sign of the end of times. Which other verses, the Quran, surahs, the Quran, when she's talking about, I will show you darkening of the falling of the stars, sun become dark, moon become dark, all those cataclysmic events kind of uh, uh, produce this kind of understanding. So they say now it's not about the miracle which happened in the time of Prophet. It is something which will happen at the end of times. And then you would see that uh, because the verse 6, 7, and 8 are talking about what's the end of times, and then people coming out of the graves, and then those who are disbelievers are scrambling toward the summoner. You know, somebody has called them, somebody have raised them from the graves. The summoner, the angel, which we call it in Farsi Israfil, blow on the trumpet, and then they coming out. They died already by the maybe blow of trumpet. Everybody died, and again they raised again. So the context is not that off, but then there are questions how you can read this as a past tense and how you did. And then you would see the title I use, which is a little bit, if the title close to Sarah Hussein was discussing, is calling it apocalyptic signs. You know, the title for today's lecture was uh, Hikmah and the signs of apocalypse. So this Inshaq al-Qamar is considered a sign of hereafter. But it could have been happened as a miracle, again, as sign of hereafter too. It's not necessarily happen to end of times to be sign of hereafter, because Quran have this logic. We're going to see that. And even the eclipse one, those guys which are supporting eclipse theory, which is the third theory, also want to say still can be a sign of hereafter. So we see we ending up with three theories. One or two say this has happened already. One says it hasn't happened, will happen. But you know, okay, the verb is past tense. We have to see how they do it. And then the one who says happening in the future is something near the end of times, and like the first verses of Surah At-Takwir. Those who say it already happened, the one majority Muslim group say it is a miracle in the time of Prophet. There is another group, nearly all Western scholars, modern scholars, and Muhammad, and then some other people, which Muhammad Asad wasn't among them himself, which their reductionist view, or they believe there is no other miracle but for the Prophet except Quran. They want to say this is a partial lunar eclipse. So we are going with this three rival views. So that's is good to have in mind. Okay, now what is Assad says? So let's see what Assad says. But whatever the nature of that phenomena, it is practically certain the above Quran verse does not refer to it, but rather does not refer to lunar eclipse or splitting of the moon as a miracle, but to a future event, namely to what will happen. Or the splitting of the moon happens in future. It then is not referring to what happened to our prophet, namely to what will happen in the last hour approaches. The Quran frequently employs the past tense to denote the future. We will see that. And particularly so in passages we speak of the coming of the last hour and the resurrection day. This use of the past tense is meant to stress the certainty of happening to which the verb relates. So we see sometimes the Arabic for an event in the future, instead of using a future tense or even present tense, a past tense is used. And that as an emphasize that this is definitely happen. It's the future, but you wording it such a way is past tense that this definitely will happen. Because there will be a time in future, but that future even has already happened. You know, one other thing we should know, the times and verbs in Arabic is not as sharply defined as other Arabic. You know, all languages, their characteristics or strengths, or we cannot say necessarily weakness. In Persian or English, the times are more sharply defined when you use the verbs. In Arabic, sometimes is this ambiguity, and it's get actually some poetical power or imagery power too. Uh, as for example, Raghib Isfani, which is one of the best known people we use, is actually referred to him last lecture, lexiconist, you know, working on the words and meaning of it, and Allama Tabatabai always referring to him as said this is possible, regards it as fully justifiable, because some commentators, some of those early tabi'in, I think, had said that Raghib regards it as fully justifiable to interpret the phrase in Shaq al-Qamar, the moon is split asunder as bearing on the cosmic cataclysm, the end of the world as we know it. That will happen before the coming of resurrection day. So we have to look at the Mufarrad al-Raghib. For example, Zamakhshari is saying that, as mentioned by Zamakhshari, this interpretation is the support of some of the earlier commentators. At least, Asad adds, it is to my mind particularly convincing in view of the juxtaposition in the above Quran verse of the moon splitting asunder and the approach of the last hour. So because it's Iqtarab al-Sa'at, which definitely is relating something about the end of times, day of resurrection, and so on. So this splitting asunder maybe is more natural, splitting asunder of the moon, natural to be related to that. Because if we don't do that, we have a splitting. You know, Iqtarab Sa'at is related to end of times, but Inshaq al-Qamar is related something before, and we are standing in between the two events. But again, that's not impossible. Quran has it that way. And actually, Inshaq al-Qamar for the people of time of Prophet could be a nazir or some warning, some miracle to explain, to show them how the resurrection can happen. In this connection, but as it continues, we must bear in mind the fact that none of the Quranic allusions to the nearness of the last hour and the day of resurrection is based on the human concept of time. Yeah, this iqtarab as-sa'at is not 1 hour or so on. Yeah, because there is also a discussion which I avoid that. I'm not going to do that. It's becoming fashionable in the Western studies and imitate everything they find in biblical studies or Jesus or personality. They want to then apply it to Islam and the big similarity. Now it is very fashionable to consider Jesus an apocalyptic preacher. And the preacher, which was means by that, is claiming the end of times is close. But you know, this secular mind is a little bit sarcastically is like many of these Protestant evangelical preachers which put an end of times. In the last 40, 50 years, we have many of them. They say, okay, the world would end in 1980 something or 2012, or the Maya said this year is end of the time. And, you know, for a while there was very popular, this would happen and get the public attention, media. And then it's kind of these elitist intellectuals usually look them down to them, but the popular people follow them. There's timing calculation and very often related also to the state of Israel or what happening over there, and then the end of times war, apocalyptic wars, and then so they taught or they preached. Oh, they say, okay, Jesus is like that. Was thinking very soon will happen. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Paul was like that. Nowadays they want to frame Prophet Muhammad like that too, and then this اقترب الساعة, and they don't get all the poetical, metaphysical one. They want to treat it like that. That Prophet Muhammad also was thinking, okay, end of times is coming 20 years, 30 years from here. But this is the level of the, as Asad mentioned, is the cosmic time of the God. And in this sense, first there is maybe two level. For every individual, that is the end of the freedom or test we have. So for all of us, that is close. And we don't know it's today, tomorrow, or 1 hour, or maybe 50 years from now. And then even the moment we die, even we live 90 years, it doesn't look long. I'm looking 30 years ago, when I come to North America, it's like yesterday. And if I passed away by 30 years from now, when near my death is today, will be like 1 hour ago. So totally we feel we are living a few hours. So for each of us, that end of times, that saw that which our record is closed and we cannot do much about it after that. And then we go into long sleep or long staying in the grave to be resurrected. But that also, it seems people do not notice much time. And when they raise, they're a little bit confused. As these verses say, they are like, look, they will image from the graves as they were scattered locusts with a humbled look in their eyes and scrambling to the summoner, the one who raised him. And faithless will say this is a hard day. So they are really uh, not a good situation. So for everybody personally, Sa is close. And then collectively, although, okay, for now, is thousands years is past, but we have hadiths from Prophet Muhammad that because he's the last prophet, prophet of end of times, they're explicit hadiths and maybe Sunni collections. He says, I am last prophet and close to end of times. If the time scale of the whole creation of universe, few billion years, creation of the earth, human beings, uh, we are close. I mean, at least human beings are few hundred years here. I mean, maybe not all have prophets. We don't know. Adam maybe come later. Okay, I mean, humanoids are there at least, okay, a few hundred years. Adam, okay, we're not exactly sure where he was, but at least 10, 15, more than 10,000 years, definitely. And maybe earlier, uh, because other humanoids were earlier. So in that sense, also we're close. And then we see later on, we discussed it, there is a psychological uh, uh, way that in this way, if the whole thing Quran was shake people, wants to, this is part of Hikmah, to shake them, to change their beliefs, change their behavior, go to the core. You need to a little bit, I mean, I call it scare tactics, but it's psychological techniques to motivate, to arouse people, to tell them, okay, exam is closed, you have to do it. I mean, you don't have much time. So these guys, if you let them, oh, yeah, a lot of times the guys will say, okay, let's leave like that. You have to make them change now. So you have to tell them it's close. So اقترب. And اقترب, they said from closeness, and اقترب is the root says is very close. When say something is قريب or قرب is close, but اقترب very close. So in that sense, that you have to not take it to the sarcastically the Western scholarship wants to claim Jesus and then Prophet Muhammad is apocalyptic preacher is not like that, but definitely for anybody the non-secular mind understand it is close. For everybody, for the whole human civilization is closed. So that's one part which Assad was referring at the end of it. Okay. Now let's go a little bit to, maybe I skip here, go to Al-Mizan, but I will come back to, because I want to at least we do the Al-Mizan, and then if I can go faster, I will go back to Some of these questions raised. Al-Mizan also mentioned it too, and then maybe I discuss it one more time. So you are not okay. Let's see. Al-Mizan. Sorry, do you have my screen now? The showing Al-Mizan.
I see that, yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah, I forgot to. Okay. So look, I'm not going to discuss Al-Mizan. Said some of the stuff we said. Allama Tabatabai mentions it. So we start from اقترب الساعة وانشق القمر. The hour has drawn near, اقترب, and the moon is split. Uh, so these are all, we mentioned some of them. Allah mentions who are the people which believing no, this verb was not used, although apparently it's past tense, but is not referring to something happened time of Prophet Muhammad, referring to maybe referring to something to end of times. Uh, and these are called them Al-Hasan must be Basri, Al-Hasan al-Basri, Ata, and Balkhi. Ata, I think maybe these are students of the Abbas and Balkhi. So Allah says, who have argued, and the moon is the split. It refers to moon splitting when the hour sets in. They say that this sentence phrase in the past tense to show the certainty with which it will happen. Allah refutes that, and there are a series of arguments to refuting that. So the strongest one is the one Allah uses, is the next verse. So let me read that. Then I give also the two less stronger argument, and these are Sahab Hussein also used and other people used. So you see, we have three theories, and one of them says this is although the verb is apparently past tense, but it's happening in future, and is happening. The splitting of moon is an even happening end of times near the resurrection. Uh, and then the argument is this: how Allah says, however, this view is bogus, and refuted by the contents of the subsequent verse. Yeah, this is the strongest argument because it doesn't make sense, or this verse loses its meaning and importance if this is even hasn't happened, because it is assuming this has happened. This is a big miracle, a big event, or at least they could get lessons of it, even in the context of solar eclipse, partial lunar eclipse. But they don't. And the translation is that if they see a sign, they turn away and say an incessant magic. So they are, look, Arabic is here. They have seen it, that ayah, which here means that miracle, that sign of God, that uh, something coming from God, which was splitting the moon. Despite seeing that, they turn away, and then they justify, okay, this is another sorcery or magic, which is doing it continuously. So they said, okay, this guy is very uh, tricky. He can pull out different magics every day, because it means, so this is not the first time they confronted Prophet Muhammad and somehow he showed something to them which make them speechless, or the argument didn't go. Mustamar is with the way we are using Farsi now, it's istimrar, that is continuing, is going. So if you read this verse, this must have happened. This must be happened, and people know about it. So this is the strongest argument. And then let's see Allama's sentence to this other option which Muhammad Assad was following. Muhammad Assad opted for this one, but that, and then and some of also Western scholars, but not many of them also got that line. And and then we saw a few of Tabi'in, and its context is the clearest evidence that the term sign here is in general meaning referring to any miracle and includes the splitting of the moon. However, when this happens, the idolaters turn away and say an incessant magic is obviously not something they can say on the day of resurrection. You know, they cannot come and say on the day of resurrection if Shaq al-Qamar is related to the day of resurrection. The day on which unrealities become manifest and humankind will pursue knowledge in order to seek refuge in it. On that day, it would be meaningless for them to say that splitting of the moon was insensate magic, so they know it's not empty magic. Therefore, there is no other possibility save that this was a miracle or something happened earlier, because we have to look at partial lunar eclipse too, was a miracle that happened to show the truth and veracity of prophets' claim, but that when it was shown to them, they accused him of practicing magic out of their obstinate disbelief. Uh, okay, so this is one argument. The other arguments, which is not, these are good, but not as strong. This one, look, اقتربت is also similarly, although it's another root, another أوزان, افتعل, this and فعل, but this is also past tense. I mean, past tense, so you cannot take it future. So, I mean, it's possible. Sometimes things not stronger, but it's not very good. When this is past tense and this is past tense grammatically, and then you interpret this future to make it certain. So why not do this? So when your commentary, you interpret this as future because I'm sorry, you consider it as past tense in the sense coming of the saw has happened. Closeness has happened. We haven't reached the saw, but we are close to it. That closeness happened. Like you call and say, okay, I'm close to office or so on. But then you consider in Shakal Gama hasn't happened. But although, again, because this saw is happening future, I mean, still that other interpretation can work. But the other one, some people said, with the Quran, and I will show you later, when Quran mentions the events end of times, very often the verb as is the word the referent, the huruf izafa, as is used to. So I will show you in one of the slides when you go back to the slide. So generally, I think that argument that in Shaq al-Qamar is referring some even happening the end of times is rejected, and we are not working on that line anymore. But we have to look the other one. Okay, there are some scientific ones. What was it? Okay, we are here. Equal. Okay, I'll mention two other ones, which two or three ones, which were not very strong, but you see, equally incorrect is the view that it says the verse is reference to recent claims of scientists that the moon was originally a part of the earth and the earth was originally part of the sun, and that each of these split off from the other. Okay, the earth is okay. The modern theory of astronomy regarding the formation of the moon says that something must have collided asteroid, something must collided Earth and the early years of its formation, and remove a good chunk of it, and that chunk later on coalesced and then produced moon. That's one of the main theories is there. Uh, it is not said Earth is separated from sun like that. And then we don't want to go to the formation of solar system theories. There must be a bigger star here before the sun. This must be exploded and then produce debris. And then those debris recoalesced again. And then the center one becomes sun, and the other ones they were spiraling, become the other planets. It's possible moon was part of that debris and coalesced around something smaller, which goes around there. But more probable, as the theory said, first a proto-Earth was produced, and then another collision separate that moon elements, and then the Earth was formed, and the moon formed, and this sun also ignited. Sun initially become uh, a debris, a dust or something, and coalesced and become more solid. And then when pressures goes higher, that nuclear fusion kicked in at the center of it, and nuclear fusion, kicked in at the center of it. We don't go through that, but yeah, the problem these guys have, the word in shaka means the same thing split into part, not it is split it with something else. So the same root shaka and if they say tashakaka or other version of this root shakaka, yeah, it could be something split from something else. For example, moon is split from the earth. But the wording in shaka means the moon is split. It's in two parts, not moon is separated or split from something else. Uh, so this is not right. And then overall, again, the other argument also, and let me use word here. Look, this must be even the most probably if the the beauty, literary beauty, cohesiveness, you look, this must be a sign. This inshaq al-qamar, whatever it is, it must be a sign this mushrikin have seen, and despite the sight, and despite the sign it was important, they rejected it. Without that, the whole thing is not good. So both arguments. First, the those guys who claim the Quran is referring to this modern scientific theory, and inshaq al-qamar is not inshaq al-qamar min al-sun. Moon is separated from Earth or from Sun. Moon is split in two parts. So these are the people that not have the command in this Arabic meaning. And then the other thing, even that is the case, those people cannot see it at the time of Prophet Thamūd separated from the earth. So then that couldn't be an ayah for them to God rebuke them in the next verse. And yara ayatan yurusu yahudu sehran mustamir. I mean, if you want to get coincidence, continuity, these two verses, you have to go that line. And then there are some other theories which it says, okay, the interpretation, Shakar Qamar. And I think these are the people more inclined to claim there is no miracles. But we haven't discussed that solar eclipse. I put it that later. Lunar eclipse, partial lunar eclipse. I put it when we go back to Sarab saying I try to go fast. There we go. Another incorrect view is the claim that splitting of the moon refers to darkness being banished when it rises. So it's very figurative, which again doesn't make sense. And still another claim that splitting of the moon is a metaphor of the truth become manifest and God's command in triumph. These are really doesn't make sense. But allow me to add, this is important. Moreover, the verse hints subtly at the fact that the splitting of the moon is an inevitable part of drawing near, drawing near. It doesn't deny that this splitting of the moon may happen at the end of times too, and it despite we think it's something happened already as a miracle, it must be somehow indicative or reminding people about the Sa'ah. And that's exactly his miracle was, to show them there is a Qiyamah, there is some resurrection, because those Mushrikeen of Arab usually believe in God, but what's the problem they had? They didn't believe in a resurrection. So even for us, so this part is also makes sense. And then, these are all part of the Hikmah, which is hidden here. So I think I don't say any more thing about the verse 2. We said what we have to say. Uh, okay, but verse 3 is this. وَكَذَّبُوا, they denied. وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُمْ, and followed their own desires. And every matter has a setting. Okay, every matter is setting means is that they didn't accept what the truth showed to you. They call it a lie, they call it a magic, and they deny it and they follow their desires. But now they can follow their desires. But everything has this verse, كُلُّ أَمْرٌ مُسْتَقَرٌ, this part of the verse is not that clear, but it usually understood that everything will be settled sometime. The truth become clear. You can avoid it, you can deny it, but sometime everything will be manifest. And then everything go to its end, its sit in its location, and truth be manifested in that sense. And that so you can deny now, but sometime you will see, okay, what you denied is not working. So Allah will ask, what did they deny? The end of the verse suggests that it was prophet and the signs that he brought. Yeah, they denying because they say Sahran Mustamar, the previous one. When they say Sahran Mustamar, that incessant magic, you are not only denying this one, they show it to you splitting the Qamar, splitting the moon, but you are denying everything till now you have seen, and possibly anything you are going to see. Because you see, all they are the same. They're all just uh, continuing magic, and he's doing the same tricks on us, only he's smart, or he is powerful. He can do different magics different times. One time is the Quran, one time is, I don't know, a prediction and something like that. So you're denying all the signs prophet is bringing to you, and then by that you're denying the priest prophet. This kazabu should be more general, and we can understand it in general. So, in other words, they denied the Prophet and the signs that he brought them, when the fact is that every matter has a place in which it will settle, and then it will be known whether it is true or false, veracious or deceitful. But you know what? Sometime you would see the end of the times, you would see that resurrection happen, you would see these were truth and you deny it. And then you will know that whether the prophet spoke the truth or not, it means he spoke the truth, whether he was upon the truth or not. Therefore, the face every matter has setting should be understood the same way as the verse, which another verse in the Quran, you will surely learn its tidings in due time. So you will know. Some hands want to uh, limit this kazzabut, the splitting of the moon, but again, this doesn't make sense. We are talking to the people which we assume they have seen the splitting of the moon. So it's not they have heard some moon is split. That could be us. Okay, maybe some people at our time they heard Prophet split the moon and Shaqal Qamar miracle. They say no, but it cannot be those people which kazzabu in this verse, because these are the one had seen it. So Allah says, some have said what was denied, in fact, was the splitting of the moon. Therefore, the meaning of verse is that they deny the splitting of the moon and follow their own desires. However, the end of the verse, and every matter has a setting, does not accord with this meaning at all, which I agree. And then, so these guys see a sign, first tell them, look, the hour is closed. And why you tell them hour is closed? Because you can, telling them this a period that you can deny, the period you can go or follow your desires is short, because the hour is getting close. We told you hour is close. We show you a sign. You start to deny it. You start calling him doing these and you follow your desires, your passion, your worldly gains. But look, it's everything has mustaqar in it. Things will be clarified. And then it generally say that they're denying prophet and signs. لَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّنَ الْأَنْبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجَرٌ. They have already come to them reports containing admonishment. They have come news, and then the most important naba usually is the news of the hereafter. This is, again, can be a discussion, but naba is kabar, news. But the most important news is naba azim, is the most important one. What the core news is, because they believe in God, there's no doubt in God, but it's that resurrection, the judgment, and so on. But other news are there too. The details in the course verses Quran till now there was revealed, telling you many other things. So has come to them important reports, important news about what is the structure of this universe is, what is the end of it is, what is the function of God is, or the important news God has any shirk. That's also the important one. And then in the news that also was accompanied by some advice, some admonishment, which, remember, we did the association with the Hikmah, with admonishment in some commentators, that they considered Hikmah is the admonish part, but regarding the fiqh issues, they said, okay, there are fiqh laws, and then hikmah is the encouragement to acting on them, doing them, performing them. But here we'll see that uh, uh, the news is about the hereafter, about the day of resurrection, and there is advices to tell them, okay, look what from the Quran, from the same prophet, be aware of it. It is closed. Please change your heed, change your ways. So the fact that the verse is followed by reports about the day of resurrection, the reports about a number of nations who perish as a result of divine punishment, suggests the phrase reports containing admonition, in fact, refers to both of these meanings simultaneously. Exactly. Some example of the news and the reports and admonishment these guys have heard as the rest of the surah. So the rest of the surah after the verse 8 again give them a narration. Okay, the reports of what? The people who denied the sign, rejected the sign, and they were punished. So these are advice. Please listen. Please change your way. This way you go is ending to the doom. And then this is the word we were looking. This reports, and then by also association to previous verse, the prophet and the signs he brought, these are the hikmatul baligha. The reports, it says, so hikmatul balighatun, فَمَا تُغْنُ النُّذُرُ. Far-reaching wisdom. This news, look if we can see both. This news, this which has admonishment, is really far-reaching, complete wisdom. This is the essence of what you should know to uh, do the right and be successful at the end. And uh, this is consists of the true wisdom. And then we see there's two sense in it. The news itself is hikmah, but accepting it and performing it and realizing them and acting according to them is also through hikmah. You know, that sense of is not just knowing but doing too. The hikmah is involved both sense of knowing and doing is the true hikmah. So the real core hikmah, or the first time, because this is the first time the word hikmah is used in the Quran, is related to this issue of end of times, which that in Shaq al-Qamar was an example, but the whole news is, and then we see the reports of other people which didn't listen to the message of God. But then Quran adds, حكمة البالغة فما تغني النذر. But warnings are no avail. Well, warners are of no avail. You know, we can go. Nuzur is a plural of Nazir, so either referring the warnings of the warners, we send them many warnings to them, didn't work, or we send them many warnings, didn't work, because it means, and this means they don't get the hikmah. They didn't, we put it in front of them, they didn't pick it up, they didn't listen to it, they didn't perform. So here, Allama add, hikmah, wisdom, signifies a true statement that is also beneficial, while the adjective baligha, far-reaching, is derived from bulugh, which literally means for something to arrive at its destination, but can also be used figuratively to denote the fullness or perfection of a thing. Therefore, far-reaching wisdom means complete and perfect wisdom. This is the important part of wisdom. Without this, nothing wisdom is good. Without knowing is a hereafter and adjusting your action like that. And many of us in practice, we don't do it. You know, there is a famous story that Allama Sabzawari, one of the latest great philosophers of it was a Qajar period, classical philosophers, was teaching, and then they come and tell him, look, there is a guy is getting crazy, is in the graveyard, and he's dug a hole or has gone slipping inside in a hole, the grave which was dig already, and doesn't coming out. Maybe you come talk to him. And then this Sheikh Sabzawari, which is a great philosopher, canceled his class. So I went to see what this guy is doing and talk to him, why you're doing that, why you're not getting back, going home, or so on. And then he said, the guy asked him who you are. He said, okay, I'm so and so. And he said, okay, I heard you're a very wise man, you know, the one who slipped in the grave. Tell Sheikh Sabzawari, knowledgeable man. But you know, I just learned today we have this world has a God, and then we are going to die, and we're going to the resurrect. We are resurrected, and we are going to answer Him. And these two, three facts have really perplexed me, worried me, puzzled me, and I cannot have rest. You know, I cannot live normal life. And truly is like that. We are somehow ignorant of these hikmats, believe without fully looking at paying attention to them. Because if, for example, today was our last day, we're sure tomorrow will not be alive, or something big. You know, tomorrow we have to go. I don't know, and a huge interview. We are restless. We are not sleeping, and all of those, even that, has something after that. You know, if we did good, but for example, somebody's going executed or martyred or some, but but resurrection is not anything after it. If we are not ready for it, I mean, and that's the prophet. Sometimes we are not always in the presence of this hikmah of truth, but prophet actually was, and then sometimes he needed reverse. He hasn't become perplexed like this man, which is this fact is overwhelming him and burning him, and kind of make him mad. And then actually, Allama Sabzawari said, "You are really true philosopher. You got the true hikmah." Uh, but the point is this. Prophet also had this situation, but sometimes he's narrated, he told with Aisha, his wife, okay, talk to me. Somehow he need to be distracted from these facts because overwhelming, coming back to the earth. Most of us, nearly all of us are stuck in the earth. Occasionally, this kind of opening comes to us, and this is the true hikmah. It's very recommended. Go see the graveyards, go visit it. Hazrat Zahra twice a week used to go, because this is the most important practical wisdom. It's not just knowing, it's believing. There are so many people bury or in the business of burying, washing the dead, but the truth doesn't go to the heart. But this is what we have to do. So in that sense, this is the hikmah balagha. But Warner, okay, and then we add to it is that uh, but Warner's nuzur of no avail. The word nuzur is the plural of nazar, meaning either someone who brings a warning or warning in the abstract sense. However, it is the first meaning that is more easily understood in this context. So Allah will look into the warners, not the warning, but doesn't matter. Uh, so it doesn't function. These guys come telling us. I mean, all of us we're warning. We see other people die in front of us. Our parents passed away. We're getting old. Uh, but does it makes us truly believe we are going to die someday from now? Most of us will not be here 50 years from now, but we don't live with that fact. Therefore, the meaning of the verse, this Quran or the message which they are being called is far-reaching wisdom, but they deny it and follow their own desires, so that avail are warners. So what avail are warners or warning? So you see, the Hikmat al-Balagha is the foremost, is the message of resurrection hereafter, is that Naba, which Prophet brings, and then part of it is exactly this news, and also the people who denied that, who did change their behavior, the punishment came to them, and his prophethood is part of Hikmat al-Balagha and his message. The other ones I go faster, but then we go to says, okay, you have people which, despite no matter what you warn them, you talk to them, it doesn't affect them. So God says, so turn away from them. The day when the caller calls to a dire thing. So it's kind of means right now turn away from them, or mostly maybe at that day. Uh, you be patient with them. I mean, try your best. But at that day, the truth's manifested and they come toward you, you can turn away from them. So the fa in fatawalla shows that this is a command is based on the description of the state given above. In other was given that they deny your prophet and follow their own desires. No amount of warnings will avail them, nor will any amount of admonition affect them. So turn away from them and do not repeat your call to them. Some people understood yet that, but I think prophet continued to do the call. It's just maybe being patient with them. Okay, or you see some stubborn ones, ignore them, go to the other ones. But generally, he continues to do the call. And then, uh, because fatawalla anhum, actually the way the Allah may read is separated. So maybe it's like the tawalla anhum is the one sentence, so turn away from them. So this is comment to Prophet. And then it's not saying tawalla anhum on that day, but it says tawalla anhum. Then it's saying, okay, there will be a day, يَوْمَ يَدْعُ الدَّاعِ إِلَى شَيْءٍ نُكَرٍ. Then there تَوَلَّوْا عَنْهُمْ, and then there will be a day with this description, which is another way arguing with them. When you remind them such a day will come, you're doing your last effort, last stitch. Okay, guys, I'm living. Are you not coming? Or okay, okay. The day when the caller calls to a dire thing, remind them there is a day which somebody will call everybody to something dire, something undesirable, something I know known, is big, but you don't know what it is. It is surprise, but it's mostly negative, a worrying surprise. They get a phone call or something which is not pleasant, shay'an or an email, no current, a dire thing. And then so the day when the caller calls the dire thing, shay noker, Al-Ragib says Inkar is denial, or as I said, the meaning either is something unpleasant, something we don't know about it and say, so let's go faster. Uh, uh, and and then it says such a day will come, and that explain farther back that in that day uh, they will have humbled look. and they will emerge from their graves as they were scattered locusts. And then before going to the next verse, let's at least because I want to go to some topic, I have to a little bit shorten. I think we have the gist of it, what we need to say. But overall, again, the verse which we were reading, which says, so turn away from them, فَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ, the day when the color caused to a dire thing, reminding that day, we can conclude is this. Therefore, the meaning of the verse is that recall the day on which the caller will summon them for an effort that will be difficult for them, namely the judgment and recompense of the hereafter. So kind of it tells them, okay, for now, ignore that. But then you mention it to them, okay, I'm going away. I'm not having anything with you guys, but no, such a day will come. And this is kind of another warning, another way essentially you haven't given hope on them. Okay, let's see, just God hasn't clearly specified in this verse who is the caller, because this is important. What the day when the caller calls to a dire thing. But as I said, most commentaries, other verses you go, it's one of those angels, we call it Israfil, which blow on the trumpet. This needs a separate commentary. I don't think so. Still, because I want to focus on the Hikmah going through it, and then the issue of that uh, solar eclipse I want to discuss. So these parts I go briefer. If we need, maybe next lecture, because we come back to some of them. So the next verse, as I said, is it continues that day which something happens which they don't like it. The caller called them to them. Uh, they will raise with a humble look. They will emerge from their graves, and they were scattered locusts. They're going around like many people. And they're out of themselves. They know what things are not good, what is going on. And the other verse continues, scrambling toward the summoner. So there is a caller calling them, and they come out of the graves and moving toward him. So they somehow they start like, I don't know what's the word. They're coming out of the graves, and they as a multitude they're moving toward the where the summoner has called them. And then the faithless will say, this is a hard day. They knew these things are not good. In other words, while they are clambering over one another, like this is the imagery of locusts, because sometimes they're swarming, they go above each other, going into each other, all clambering over one another in a rush to respond to the one has called them forth. The faithless will say, this is a most difficult day. Uh, okay, I think we did good here. There are hadith discussions. I don't think it's anything special is added to what the basic narration I read from study Qur'an. Just Allama has listed who these hadiths are narrated from. You have Anas ibn Malik, Abdullah ibn Masud, Ibn Umar, Jurayy ibn Mut'im, Ibn Abbas, Huzayf ibn Yaman, and even some sense from Imam Ali, they say this is narrated. There is a discussion about miracles, which I think we need to go next lecture. But let's go back to our slides, because I want the few minutes we have, this part of this partial eclipse and things around it we discuss. Okay. Uh, okay, so what I'm saying is, so as summary of the things is the line maybe Sarah Hussein picked up. We are not thinking this Inshaq al-Qamar as something will happen in the future. We agree it's happening in the past. But we have two camps. The majority camp thinks this is a miracle. But then we have the Western scholars and non-modernist thinkers and some new thinkers, which they think Prophet Muhammad didn't have any miracles about except Quran. So, and then they will see, they try to understand it in a non-miraculous way. And then, as I said, that partial lunar eclipse is part of the story. Okay, let's see how this works. This is again a summary of what we have seen before. Most tafsir works connect the opening verse of Surah al-Qamar to a hadith in which the Prophet miraculously split the moon before the Meccan pagans in response to their demands for a miracle. There is also a minority opinion among the Mufassirun that the verse refers to future splitting of the moon as part of the cosmic upheaval, heralding the onset of the scattering, which we said this will be rejected by us, including Saghab Hussein and Muhammad Asad, Allame, and me. This latter interpretation, but he says something which I want to discuss in next lecture. Saghab Hussein says this latter interpretation, that is even in future, avoids the tension that would otherwise arise between the Prophet's opponents having been shown a miracle and the repeated insistence in the Qur'an that the Prophet would not perform any miracle to satisfy the demands of his opponents, and they will be given and all they will be given as a miracle is Quran itself. And then Saghab Hussein mentions these verses 50 and 51, chapter 29. This is the one I think we should discuss next lecture, which is true or not, and what says is miracles is here. And Allama has discussed it, a longer discussion he has. The verses he has mentioned, I don't think as indicative, but just to read it, if they say, why has not some sign been sent unto him from his Lord? So sign means here miracle. Say these signs are only from God. I am only a manifest foreigner. So this is not necessarily that conclusion that no other sign except Quran will be sent. And then he's added, does it not suffice them? We have sent unto you the book which is recited to them. There is indeed in that a mercy and admonition for a people who have faith. Yeah, this maybe you combine, maybe you say, okay, Quran is indicating directly this is enough, this is suffice. So, but this line, I don't pick it up, but let's go to this issue of Inshaka one more time. Uh, uh, as more this issue of again the whether the verb in shaka can be used future and past tense. I think there's some part in it, but I will go faster. The verb in shaka is okay. So the fact although we rejected those view of those scholars thinking this in shaka um it can happen in the future, although despite the appearance of it is past tense. But I think this grammatical point is good to pay attention to it and show you one example, although we already rejected it. So maybe it was better I said this earlier before rejecting it. But okay, I say it in the context of discussion, Allama, but I want you to pay attention to this one more term. Look, the verbs as Arabic, as I said, is not always sharp in time. And then this is what is called suffix conjugation, is essentially is the past tense or past perfect tense. I will show you another slide to it too. Does not have to refer to past events, but may also be used to refer to future events whose occurrence is certain. So as I said, they refer to future by using a past tense word, but that they make it this is certain because then there is a future beyond that future which shows this has happened, and for that future, the second future, will be past tense. Look, the usage of shaka in Shaka al-Qamar is 20 times in Quran, and then there are different variety. But the one which is we are very interested in is this in shaka, or is very close root. So we see in shaka, in shakat, in shakat, in shakat. 4 verses is in shaka. Those uh, uh, suffix at the end doesn't change much, and then 10 and shaka is actually the present tense one. But look, the verse we are discussing is اقترب الساعة وانشق القمر, which we're discussing appearance is past tense, and we want to understand past tense. But there are other cases, especially this all three, that the word is used as past tense, the verb. grammatically is past tense, but really means future. Because فإذا انشقت السماء سماء فكانت وردة كالدخان. So, or these one is وانشقت السماء ففيها يومئذ واهية. إذا السماء انشقت. These most probably are referring to events in near the hereafter. So again, the same verb is used, is apparently past tense, and is definitely referring to even in future. So that's those guys with claiming, okay, this must be future even regarding end of times, uh, arguing. I didn't show the full argument first, but we rejected this mostly because of the اقترب and this as, although as is not here, and then most importantly, the next verse. So let's go forward. And then there is another example. I want you to be aware of this feature in Quran. And then this even has a name. Hebrew has the same situation too. They call it prophetic perfect. Perfect is the way the Semitic languages they're referring the past tense root of the verb. The present tense they call it naqis, and then perfect they call it for the past tense. Some reasons are there. And then prophetic perfect is this type of thing, like you because you predict something, and then because you're certain it's happening, or you want to emphasize it's happening, instead of future tense, instead of using sa at the beginning, you use you use past tense. And then, for example, you have it in the Surah Al-Ghaf. And then you see in the Surah Al-Ghaf, we have the same situation that although what is talking is about end of times, but all the verses are used in past tense, but the meaning is all in future tense. So I don't read it much, but look, for example, the agony of death will come. Ja'at is the past tense, but meaning is future. Will come in truth. That is what you have been avoiding. There will be a blast, which is clearly nufakha on the trumpet, which we're talking. Again, the verb is past tense, but the meaning definitely is future. And again, this is prophetic perfect, which is emphasized, this is happening. So those guys was reading it in Shakat al-Qamar in the future tense were not off. But the second verse is which Allama used, and even Saghab Hussein used to reject this interpretation. And all of these verses of Surah Al-Ghaf, you see, have the same situation. Each soul will come accompanied by a driver and a witness. But each soon, Ja'at is the past tense, but it hasn't happened, will happen. His company will say Ghala and so on. So this feature is good to know. So I'm not going to, explain suffix conjugation, but this is a grammatical thing, so it's good to know. And then these are the arguments which I said, the three arguments which we go against still reading in future tense. And then the example, as I said, one of arguments we use that this is not future tense is that very often this issue of the end of times happen with the as, like as الشمس كبرت, as النجوم انكدرت, as الجبال سيرت, as الأشجار أطلت. So that's many of those people also read Shakal Qamara like that, but he didn't have Eza. But again, Eza is not very clear indicator. The most strongest argument was the second verse. Now let's see this lunar eclipse thing. Look, lunar eclipse is the total lunar. It become dark, but become reddish because the background is not as bright. Very often it's dark, but it's a reddish thing. We had it a few weeks ago. This is not the one. It can be that it's Shakalala. This is numeral lunar eclipse. It's not a full shadow, it's go to half shadow. This side become darker, but sometimes you don't see it very well with naked eye. Instruments can see, or trained eye can see it. But this one is a partial lunar eclipse. Look, it is possible to the word and shaka used. Because people usually think, especially based on the hadiths or other one, is split in two parts. But in this sense, it may be split. One part is taken away and is not seen because it's full moon. This lunar eclipse happens full moon, always full moon, 14, 15 of the month, always the middle of the month. and then it is full eclipse or the partial or total anumbra. If it is partial, this kind of seeing is so the word inshaqqa can be used because it's like a cookie. You take part of it away, breaking it two parts, splitting two parts, and the other part may be eaten. Is not there. This needs to look what exactly those people were using this word at that time. Because I think there is a possibility it was being used as this terminology, but the later commentator lost this language because many of those things about reading hadith, channel nuzul hadith, because this hadiths people claim tawatur. Jawad Amali said tawatur, but then he says, okay, some Sunni says it's not tawatur. I think majority of hadiths are Sunni. The Shia ones are Sunni. And then I haven't done the hadith work, but I would not be totally surprised. I'm still more inclined to the miracle because of the second verse that some of the hadiths are not that independent. They're repeating the same thing. Somebody says, or this is the understanding, or so on. But it's much more than other ones. And then I see some Shi versions which are embellish the story, especially those who I saw one in Tafsir Burhan, which is Hamdan Khassibi, which is the founder of this Alawite, Ghali extremist group, that they really expand the whole story, which is the core story. So have this picture and see what Saddam Hussein says. I'm not necessarily agreeing, and I try. Okay, we have not much time, 10 minutes to finish it. Look, uh, uh, okay, let's go back to his thesis, and we go fast. Okay, what Saddam Hussein says is this. Among Western scholars, because look, Western scholarship after this turn
Dr.
to
Ghoddoussi, did you
yes.
share? Because I
Okay. You don't see anything now? Okay, let me stop sharing. Share it again. Do you see it now?
yes,
Thank you. Look, Western scholarship, Western religious studies, by default, they're working framework historical, critical, by definition, by postulate, no miracles is aligned. So everything should be explained reductionistly. So all of them, even this, they are religious or not, they try to explain naturalistically. So among those Western scholars which do not think this is about end of times, there were a couple of them were, but majority, which we mentioned, Neuvert, Bell, and Rubin, which align with the majority of Mufassirin, they consider this verse happening, some event happening in the time of Prophet. So they all think it's the past tense, it's happened sometime in the time of Prophet, but the difference is that they don't consider this a miracle, but they call it a partial lunar eclipse. So in such a happening, around half of the moon would have darkened over, thus phenomenologically appear to be split. You look phenomenologically, just looking apparently. So I'm saying it's possible Arabs at that time use an inshaqqa word inshaqqa for it, because it's like you suddenly see the half of moon has gone away, like a child see Cookie Monster, for example, eat the cookie, something like that. I believe this understanding of the verse is correct. This is Saddam Hussein things, and I'm not agreeing with it, but wouldn't change much of our discussion about Hikmah, but I think it's important regarding the whole miracle, especially if you're in the camp thinking Prophet has owned no miracle except Quran and so on. Okay, one of the discussion is that whether Shaqqa can be used for this event, because maybe we don't have the clue etymologically they used it with the partial solar eclipse. But inside the Quran, we have the Shaqqa used for not end of times events, for end of times, for example, Kadara or so on, but the events which related to this world and natural phenomena. So the verb, as I show you a little bit, the verb is used 3 times in the Quran, referring to splitting of the sky. Okay, part of the heralding of final judgment, but still this physical sky. It cognates and synonym with tashaqqaqa, similarly, it cognates and synonym with tashaqqaqa, similarly use one for splitting of the sky again. So I show you this tree, this one. Once for splitting earth. So all of the time this is used for splitting. But again, these are at least what contrary to what Sarah was saying, these are really cataclysmic events, So it's not that simple partial eclipse which Arabs and all Semitic peoples from time of Babylonians were familiar. The point is, say, Arabs and Semitic people were familiar with eclipses, solar and lunar. But except they used to call this partial lunar eclipse as enshaka. If that is the case, okay, then things may be changed. Neither verb, however, is used in connection with the scatological splitting of the moon, but although they're used in some scatological other events, uh, he says in the Bible, when we want to refer to a Bible, apocalyptic Syrian Christian literature, we want to look at the events of end of times. We talk about darkening of the moon, but not splitting of the moon. And then the other cognates of the root shakka, has been used to more naturalistic phenomena. And shakka itself have been used regarding the earth and the sky, splitting of the earth, splitting the sky. But these are all eschatological events, the way those other guys, which future tense understood it. Or what we kind of say the miracle is. But we have the splitting of the earth as the vegetation coming out. Quran use shakka, rock splitting and producing spring. Quran says the heart of these disbelievers are more hardened than the rock because rock will split and water will coming out of it. We have in pre-Arabic poetry, or close to time of prophet, like Nabiga al-Zubyani says regarding like the suddenly sunrise, then the column of down split in Shaka before her while she was racing as a powerful she-camel runs, fearing the meat-loving hunter. So it is referring another inner worldly cosmological phenomenon, namely how the vertical downlight appears on the eastern horizon, split the night sky. And so he says all of these leads credence to the possibility that the splitting of the moon in Surah al-Qamar may have readily been understood by the Quran audience to refer to a partial lunar eclipse, particularly if they have recently experienced one. I mean, if that is the case, this must be a word have been used, and I think this must be a word used in other Semitic languages. And I think if that, because the lunar eclipses were established from 1,000 years before from Babylonians. I haven't done the search. He hasn't done the search, but he has done another type of search, so I mention it. He says, okay, he looked to these catalogs of lunar eclipses that the period of the Makkan presence of the Prophet Muhammad 610, 622, he noticed there have been 32 lunar eclipses in the whole world, globe one. But because we only need partial eclipses, only 4 partial eclipses, uh, because the other total lunar eclipse is more interesting for us, but it's not the one we can describe the splitting, because you see the whole moon, but reddish and darker, the whole moon, because there is no contrast between bright and dark side of the moon. But when you have partial eclipse, part of it is really seems dark. And so only 4 were partial eclipse during this period, that the type that could phenomenologically be described as the moon splitting. Which is in that a portion of visible moon would have been darkened out usually for around 2 to 3 hours. That would have been visible from Mecca. And then he talks maybe because Quran usually doesn't use the word, they have used the word khasafa or khusuf, we use khusuf and kusuf. Kusuf for sun, but khusuf for khasafa, for moon. But then he says, but I think this is a little speculative. He says maybe khasafa is used for total lunar eclipse, and then shaka is used for partial lunar eclipse. This is also possible, because we don't have few words for all these eclipses, but this was important for them. The cultures, when something's important for them, they coin many different words for it. For example, the natives of North America, snow was important for them. They have many different names for different type of snow, which we don't. So it's possible khasafa was used for full lunar eclipse, and shaka used for partial lunar eclipse. That I agree. But and then out of these 4, one was interesting. He said the one which is happening around 1st of January 1614, which is again close to the 4 years after the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, early stage of it, and which we know this Surah 54 is among the earliest surahs of the Quran. And this is visible from Mecca. And not only is visible to Mecca, the eclipse happens at a time near midnight, which moon is at the zenith, at the peak, at the as the highest point in the sky, because the full moon comes out during sunset, and then it is out in the whole night. Reverse for the new moon, which is just few minutes after the sunset, you can see and good sets. But the full moon comes out during sunset. It is the whole night out. It goes up like the sun rises, moon rises, and goes from east to west, and then sets again to west during sunrise. So you have it about 12 hours night. If the January, the nights are long, And then at the midnight is at its peak, is the most visible place. It's not down the horizon, behind the trees. It's just above your head, and everybody would see it. Would be very good spectacle, and it is covered. It's close to zenith, a little bit 5 degrees up. So moon is slightly over 10 degrees removed from the zenith, the latter being the highest point in the sky directly above the observers. From an analysis of lunar eclipses, the 6th and 7th century in the canon of lunar eclipses, this is almost unique. There is only one other partial lunar eclipse, more prominent, closer to zenith in Mecca night sky, which happened in 559. And then he goes to a little bit explanation that similar phenomena regarding the sun Pleiades, which is mentioned in Surah An-Najm, actually must happen around the same times, few days or few weeks earlier. So two celestial events regarding one the star, one lunar partial eclipse, which are the two surahs back to back, maybe have astronomically happened back very close distance each other. But let's ignore this star part, because he did a lot of comparison between 53, 54. The surahs have similarities. There are some. I mean, the point is that for the Surah 53, nobody doubts this is a celestial natural effect. And then 54 people, everybody thinks Qamar is a miracle. But then while looking to the parallelism, look, for example, it says, verse 1 mentions the splitting of the moon. Verse 1 of Surah An-Najm 53 says, mentioning the falling of the star, which is at midnight, during the night is at the zenith, and then it goes down by the time passes. And then again, the other verse mentions, for example, Surah Al-Qamar says, but if they see a sign, they turn away. But regarding the Surah An-Najm, it says, his eye did not swerve nor transgress. Indeed, he saw the greatest signs of his Lord, referring to that star. They have denied and followed their own whims. The Surah Al-Qamar, so means they denied this splitting of the moon. But Quran in the Surah An-Najm, nor does he speak out of whim. There are similarities, but not that much similarities. So I don't think we go to that line. Because this until we really know Arabs are using Inshaq al for a lunar eclipse, we cannot go partial lunar eclipse. We cannot do that. And he hasn't shown evidence for that. I couldn't go looking for that. He's discussing a lot discussions about Surah An-Najm similarity and Surah Qamar, but let's put it aside. But what it's saying is this. Okay, nonetheless, the cumulative evidence supports the proposition that the opening verse of Surah Al-Qamar refers to a lunar eclipse over the Meccan sky. Okay, he thinks like that, maybe disagree. And the similarities between the opening sections of the Surah 53, Najm, and Surah 54, Qamar, indicate that eclipse resemble the zenith appearance of Pleiades referred to the Surah An-Najm. And this suggests that it was indeed eclipse. This eclipse, which we said could be seen in Mecca the 1st of January 2014. I will finish in a minute. With its marked prominence in the night sky and multiple similarities to the evening zenith appears for Pleiades, occasioned the opening the verses that happened very close together. The surah goes on to describe the aforementioned splitting of the moon as a visible sign, ayah, the unbelievers reject as a magic. The reference to unbelievers dismissing every sign, verse 2, follows naturally from the supports the interpretation of opening verse further above. Okay, look, so he was arguing this is a natural phenomena, but a natural phenomena which has a message. You know, it is not the Arabs had not seen partial solar eclipse, they know about it. But this is the type of wisdom that you reflect by the natural phenomena and learning lesson from them, which Quran has that type. Maybe I discuss it next lecture, which especially by Quran mentions by looking to this uh, the the plants dying in the winter and again coming to life in the spring is exactly the sign of the resurrection, this kind of example. So in this way reading, it says this: the fact of the solar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse, is like moon is splitting in parts and then again is revived. This natural phenomena, these cycles, if you reflect on it, if you think on it, uh, if you're a wise person, it could be a sign for you as an indication of the resurrection, the same way all these death and life or other natural processes are. And then we'll see next lecture, there is a similarity in this kind of messaging in some of those books which we saw, wisdom traditions we saw, the biblical one. So I think I will stop here, but although, let me see, is anything important? I think we can stop here. Look, just maybe I read with this one. Uh, uh, Look, they say, uh, look, Rubin has, I believe, are correctly argued the splitting of the moon here is only a figurative preview of the imminent literal splitting of the moon, as well of the entire heavens. So this splitting of the moon, which is not literal, is a partial solar eclipse. But because we haven't seen how the sun is in Kadarat, we haven't seen the turning of the stars. And here we didn't see the real splitting of the moon, but we saw some partial solar eclipse, uh, which can indicate what will come in the hereafter, which will cataclysmic. But the timing is interesting. And then I'm saying this interpretation, I mean, did the prophet timed it or was aware of it, or just they all aware this is happening and the prophet took them out? Look how the beauty. For example, I show a flower to my children. Look how this flower is complicated, beautiful. Is this a sign of creativity of God? And maybe everybody was waiting for this partial solar lunar eclipse, and they go all watch it in Mena, and then during the Hajj season, and then prophet used the moment, say, look, guys. This is also similar. This cycle, this changing, this splitting is the sign what the hereafter will be. It could be, but it's different what we have been always understanding. This is identical. Let me finish by this paragraph. This is identical to function many Quranic oaths have, as Bento Shati and Angelica Neuvert have demonstrated. Look, many Quranic oaths, which we have discussed in other lectures before at the beginning of the shortest surahs, especially those surahs which referring the events of near end of time, start with some oaths. They have this function that bringing your attention to some of these natural phenomena, and then God, when take your attention to them, then it's swear, okay, this would happen. So it says this in Shaqqat al-Qamar is doing the same thing, that paying attention or bringing attention, focusing on attention on something natural happen like partial lunar eclipse, which was not that common, 4 in that 10 years of the whole world, and this one with this peak and everybody's seen only happen every few decades. Insofar as they pick a physical observable phenomena as an analogy for a hidden or future reality, so this is the nature indicating what will happen. Indeed, the placement of the verse at the start of surah strongly suggests its functioning similar to common surah opening oaths. As for whether the Quran warning of the nearness of hour should be taken at face value to mean the scripture proclaimed and imminent scatology unfolding, we return to that. We were not discussing this, but this part I don't need to read. But what we want to discuss next lecture is a little bit discussion about miracles, and also so sorry, this sentence we don't need to read because I discussed it. I want to go through it, but we are going to discuss a little bit miracles and also this biblical tradition, prior tradition that somehow connecting end of times event, or look into the science of end of time event by looking to natural phenomena, which Quran has it too. So thank you for your attention. We shall continue next lecture.